Hi, guys, and welcome to Guild Chat. I'm your host, Ruby, and we're going to talk about the Path of Fire story today. I'm really excited to share this with you and our dev guests, but there's something else I want to talk about with you first. Some of you have heard us talking here and there about how we're going to be celebrating you, our community, throughout February, and I want to start the show by telling you how we're going to do that. The community, you guys, are one of the highlights of Guild Wars 2, and we're going to spend February celebrating that. The way we're going to do that, we're asking you to share your stories of relationships that you've made in Guild Wars 2, platonic or romantic, by sharing those with us on text, video, pictures, however format you prefer. And you can send those to us on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, using the hashtag GW2Friendships. I've been trying to say Guild Wars 2 Friendships the whole time. GW2Friendships. And a note, if you share on the Facebook page, that needs to be a post directly on the Guild Wars 2 Facebook page's wall, because Facebook search is weird. We're going to start showcasing those on the Guild Wars 2 page pretty soon. But there's a little something else that we have for you. You've heard us talk about how we want you all to feel like you have a friend at ArenaNet. So through the month of February, we're going to have a little gift from one friend to another. Starting this Tuesday after the game build, the first time you log your character into Lion's Arch, you'll have a little gift in your mail that's an endless friendship tonic. This is an effect that you put on yourself, on your own character, by double-clicking it once, and you will double-click it again to turn it off. This is good the entire month of February, so whenever you have a chance to log in, that will come to you. And this is good every February from here on out, so those friends of ours who haven't started playing Guild Wars 2 yet don't miss out in future years. So that gift is coming to you next week. But there's a little bit something more. We've managed to round up some prizes to go with this event. If you would like to enter a random draw for some prizes, use the hashtag GW2Friendships and add the hashtag GW2Giveaway. And at the end of the month, you'll be entered in for a random draw for one of 50 $10 off coupons at our friends at For Fans by Fans for some Guild Wars 2 merchandise. So we have 50 of those, but there's something else. After we draw those 50 winners, we're going to keep drawing, and 5 of you will get the chance to work with one of our creative partners to have a commission done of an in-game character of your choice, plus another character of your choice, presumably your character and that of your favorite adventuring companion. So we're going to give that to 5 of you. But there's a little something else, and I have to keep looking at my list for this one. We're going to draw 2 more winners after we draw all of those, and those 2 winners will get to take a friend and come visit your friends here at ArenaNet. We're going to give you and a +1 round-trip travel to Seattle during the weekend of PAX West. We'll give each of you PAX West badges for all 4 days, 6 days and 5 nights in a hotel, 1 or 2 rooms, as you and your traveling companion prefer, and a $50 per diem for each of you to cover your food and general traveling around the city for the day. So we're going to start that today, and we want to hear all of your stories, and thank you all for being a part of our community here in Guild Wars 2. And now we are going to start talking about the Path of Fire story with our Guild Wars 2 game director. Mike, I'll let you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about your history here at ArenaNet.
Hi, I'm Mike Zadorozhny. I'm the game director on Guild Wars 2. I've been with ArenaNet just over 12 years, like 2 weeks ago.
Congratulations.
So I started here in the quality assurance team, mostly just testing Guild Wars factions before it originally came out. And it was a small dedicated team, about 8 testers, and it was a chance for us to prove that what a dedicated group in-house could really do for the studio. And then it just kind of blossomed from there. So got hired on full-time after factions launched, and then after Nightfall, I was able to take over the team. And then when the studio was like, hey, we want to go work on Guild Wars 2, they left me in charge of production for the Guild Wars 1 live team. So I worked with Lindsay Murdoch when she was originally the lead designer of it, and then John Stummy shortly thereafterwards. So I spent probably 3 or 4 years working on Guild Wars 1 and kind of crafting the Guild Wars Beyond kind of experience for the players and helping make sure that we were shipping regularly for them. And then I jumped over to Guild Wars 2. So I joined the content design team over there and just had a wonderful time working on maps like Snowdin Drifts, Fields of Ruin, Harathi Hinterlands. And then after Guild Wars 2 shipped, I got a chance to kind of take over, again, more of the leadership role. So I started becoming more of a design POC, working with the Living World teams, working with like the Super Venture Box team, with the Fractals team, and kind of helping make sure that we were hitting a consistent bar for quality, that we were still continuing to innovate on all the game spaces that we wanted to with Guild Wars 2. Eventually started moving towards working on some systems. So I redesigned the achievement reward system, or the daily achievement system, and then worked on the login reward system. And this was about the time that we were working Heart of Thorns. So I got pulled back into that. So I did the Mouth of Mordremoth encounter in Dragonstand.
It was huge.
Yeah, that was about 4 or 5 months worth of just dedicated development, working with the artists to kind of craft how the experience was going to be, kind of what we wanted the overall fight to look like, and how we wanted really the players jumping from platform to platform, and really kind of being able to make it a much more dynamic encounter than some of the other large-scale bosses we've been able to do in the past. And then after that, it was about, okay, well, now new season of Living World and Path of Fire. So I stepped up and led the design team for Path of Fire, worked with 100+ dedicated people who just had amazing passion and vision and just so much love for the content and the franchise. And you're going to hear a lot of their stories here later today. And it was a wonderful experience. Everyone just really wanted to bring a new light and re-envisioning and the exploration of Guild Wars 2, and it was just a wonderful experience. And now that that's out of the way, it's okay. Now we're doing another season of Living World. We're continuing the storyline where we left off, and so I've stepped up and I'm now replacing Mike O'Brien as the game director, and really just kind of continuing that legacy. There's been a number of people who've been in this role before, that are giants. These are legends in the Guild Wars 2 community and in MMOs in general. And so just really kind of being able to pick up where they've left off and carry that torch, but then also being able to expand on it as well. So not just with Living World, not just with World versus World updates and PvP and raids and fractals, but we've got some more in our back pocket that we're kind of working on. And just most recently, we've kind of been a little bit more open with the communication, like with the world restructuring plan for World versus World, and some of the balance updates we have that are coming next week with some of the design changes for Mesmers and Phantasms. Okay. So it's all just getting started. It's really exciting. It's been a whirlwind 12 years, and it's we're just getting started. So it's super fun. It's great people, and I love this place. So
I know it's been a super long road that doesn't feel like it has slowed down very much at any point. But as to more open communication, I know you guys really appreciate that, and it's good to hear that we're going to keep doing that.
Yeah, no, it is one of our goals to kind of, like you said, we want people to feel like they have a friend at ArenaNet. So how best do we do that? Through kind of the constant messaging, the Let's Play stuff that you guys were doing the other day with the World versus World team out there. And I'm constantly in the game just because I love it. I love the fans. I love our community. I mean, even this friendships initiative is, you pitched it to the design team and just design in general, or the live team in general, and everyone was super excited because someone once told me that we don't make games, we build communities. We just do it the best way possible, which is through games. And I wholeheartedly believe that. Guild Wars 2 would be nothing without the community and without the interaction and just the love and the generosity of the people that are out there.
It's very true.
And so for us, it's being able to continue this legacy and be able to work with them and communicate with them and have this lasting impression. Because even some of the stories that are going to come out during the friendships, this matters more to us than like anything else that we do, because it means that what we're doing actually matters, that there's a point that players are connecting to, and being able to touch people's lives in that way is just so unique. that it's one of the reasons why I got in this business is I wanted to tell stories and I wanted to be able to leave an impression and a legacy to kind of the people that are playing the games that Guild Wars 2 success or failure, I think, is going to be like years after we've already shut the servers down, many decades in the future, where like players can still remember fondly those experiences and the friendships that they made and kind of what the game has meant to them. And so that's kind of where I want our legacy to be and
Yeah.
where we're going.
And that those relationships endure. And
Exactly.
we've seen that, and it's an amazing, amazing thing. So thank you guys for that. All right, well, would you like to get us started and introduce the Pathfire story, and we'll move on to our first round of dev guests?
So yeah, a lot of the stuff, we've talked about Path of Fire story development before in the past. A lot of this is going to be much more behind the scenes, and we can kind of go back and talk about some of the things that maybe didn't necessarily make it into the final cut. Because there's a lot of really cool stories and cool moments. And again, these are all people who were very dedicated over an 18-month period to kind of build in such a monumental experience for this and really push the bar in terms of what we did for storytelling for Guild Wars 2. And so this is just the starting point. So I hope you guys all enjoy this. We definitely had a lot of fun and a lot of love put into this project. So for us, this is just another chance for us to kind of give you a glimpse behind the scenes, some of the decision-making process, how we thought about some of these things, and showing once more like the love, the passion, even the friendships between us. In some cases, like we're not even coworkers; we're more friends than we are at that level. And so, yes, enjoy, and we'll see you in game.
All right. We will be back in just a couple minutes. Thanks, Mike. All right, we are back with our first round of dev guests, and we're going to jump right in. I'll go down the line, let you guys introduce yourselves, and talk a little bit about your role here at ArenaNet and what you worked on for Path of Fire Story.
My name is Tom Abernathy. I am the studio narrative director, and in a general sense, what that means is I oversee a team of about 20 writer narrative designers, editors, VO folks, and the main part of my job is sort of helping everybody sort of understand the quality bar that we're trying to hit, help everybody continue to hone their craft, and make the narrative aspects of Guild Wars 2 and as good as they can possibly be. And on Path of Fire, I actually started about a year ago almost, and so I kind of came on in the middle of Path of Fire. So most of my involvement was sort of from roughly the middle of the whole thing to the end, basically in Connie's area. So
Tom and I are good
segue.
I'm Connie
Speaking of
Griffith.
Connie.
I am one of the story designers on Path of Fire. I joined the project about a year and a half before launch. By the time I'd gotten here, the broad strokes had been sort of decided, and it was my job to take the little corner that had been assigned to me and work with these guys Tom and Scott to really bring it to life and create an exciting new chapter for Guild Wars fans.
And I'm Scott McGough. I was the narrative lead for Path of Fire. I was one of the people who helped lay down the broad strokes before full production started. And then we took things as far as we could. And then very talented people like Tom and Connie joined us and helped us bring it across the finish line. I was responsible for the overall lore and story, both the instance story, linear story that you tell with the commander, and the world story of all the stuff that's going on in the Crystal Desert region with Joko missing and everything else that's going on there.
Nice. Well, let's start with some fun stuff and talk about some of your favorite things that you worked on and put in the game. And now it's a free-for-all. I don't care who talks first.
Well, I actually really enjoyed working with Scott. I had the great fortune to actually be able to sit directly behind Scott, so I'd constantly like turn around and be like, "Hey, Scott," right, and ask questions.
So
because...
you heard all those things I muttered to myself.
Oh man, the struggles with your keyboard. It was really fun for me to create the glint crystal memories, which is something that we ended up kind of running with in Path of Fire, and just being able to kind of delve into the lore and really get into like the mind of the Great Crystal Dragon, Glint, and sort of explore the things that she might have been thinking and feeling. It's a sort of depth that you don't really get to do. It's outside of gameplay, but it's so important. It's giving life to events that happen off screen, and it was a really fun collaborative effort with the writers. So I'm pretty proud of that.
Mm-hmm. And I will second that emotion. It was a really fun collaborative effort between narrative and designers on this project. We worked extra hard at the very beginning of the project. We all sat down, the entire team, writers, artists, designers, animators, marketing, anyone who had anything to do with Path of Fire. And we just brainstormed what could happen in the Crystal Desert region. What sort of things do we want to show? What do we think players want to play and see in this? And so we generated this mountain of ideas that me and several other of the people who were in lead positions sort of sifted through, tried to focus it down, narrow it down to these are the things we want to work on. But from the very beginning, it was a hugely rewarding and collaborative process.
Yeah, I mean, we created Vlast crystals also as well. That's something you get to see in 8.
Yep.
Yeah.
And I can talk that. The question was, what are you proudest of working on? The Vlast crystals was one of my personal favorite parts because we knew we were going to introduce Vlast and that he was going to die in fairly short order, which can be frustrating, but it was meant to sort of illustrate the tragic nature of the character. He didn't have a lot of the advantages that we hoped to give Aureen as a young baby dragon. And so he wasn't ever socialized properly. He never had a champion. And so he was this tragic figure. He didn't connect with mortals the way Glint had and the way we hope Aureen will. And so since he did show up and die so quickly, I was really happy we had the chance to get his character out there so people would understand better where he was coming from, what his mindset was, and what his role was in the Crystal Desert. In the grand scheme of Glint's legacy, what was his part to play? And perhaps indicate how unhappy and frustrated he was with that part because it wasn't all he hoped it would be. So tragic character with a tragic end, but this let us put his thoughts on stage and let people see why they should care about this tragic character.
As a player, I really appreciated that because we hadn't really met Vlast. I mean, we kind of knew back in the background that he existed, but because of what you guys put in there, I really cared when he died, and that was a key point in the story for me that I really felt.
Thank you very much. I'm glad to hear that because that's what we were shooting for. Despite the fact that he had limited screen time, if you cared that he died, then we did our job right.
Thank you for hurting me.
No, you're welcome. Anytime.
Well, I mean, I think that's a general philosophy that Tom can speak more to this as well, is that, you know, telling story in video games is very interesting, and the maxim, show, don't tell, is even more important, especially since we have tools to bring things to life that we can't necessarily do just, say, in a book or something like that, right, with just text. And that's definitely something we tried really, really hard to do. I definitely think like Chapter 7, that was the chapter that Tom came in. That's the whole epic Cormier reveal.
Yep.
I definitely going to let Tom kind of tell his bit when he came in mid-fire, so to speak.
Yeah, I was drinking from several different fire hoses at the same time. But
We're
yeah,
sorry,
I mean,
but thank you.
not a problem. Fortunately, I was prepared for it. I was given ample information and was ready to run as soon as I hit the ground. So two of my favorite things. I love the Cormier chapter particularly, and that was a scene that went through a lot of iteration. Mo got very hands-on. Mo rediscovered, I think, his joy in developing on Path of Fire, and so he was really a big part of the process with that scene specifically, as well as some other stuff. And so that was really cool and fun to work on and hone and get it to where we wanted it to be. I really love the branching speech that the commander has at the end at the party, which basically, I mean, that's not something that we do a lot of, but the reason that we made that choice was that we all had slightly different ideas of what we wanted to hear the commander say at that point.
Oh.
And so rather than choose one, we decided let's sort of give voice to all of them and let the players sort of find their way through it and pick the one that feels best to them. And then, of course, you get different reactions from people afterwards and during, actually, based on which path you're taking. And so that was that was cool. Those are always fun to do. And the other thing that I really loved. And I give Mo a lot of the credit for this, honestly, is immediately following the Cormier chapter. We knew that in terms of the story, what Cormier basically has said to you is, we're out. We're not going to help you because we feel like we mess things up whenever we try to. And so this is your world. This is your problem. Bye. Go deal with it. Yeah. Mic drop. Peace out. And so story-wise, the commander, and everyone with the commander are put back in the world without a solid sense of what they should do next. And in game design,
This is weird for you.
it's a very dangerous thing. Yes, it's almost like the conventional wisdom is that you never leave the player without a sense of what they're supposed to be doing, right? That you always want to be giving them information about how to play the game and what their next objective is, how they can go about trying to achieve it, and everything. And Mo really argued forcefully for not doing that in this case. He said, the characters have been given nothing to go on. Let's give the player nothing to go on. Let's just plop them down in the desert with the vaguest of direction and let them make them basically have to figure it out. And I thought that was really a stroke of genius. And I don't know very many people in his position, or my position for that matter, who would have been brave enough to sort of take that chance. But I think it paid off. I think it's a really cool experience.
It did, and I am aware that it worked, but I still have like residual stress on your behalf. I'm just like, oh gosh.
Sorry.
No, you're right. It was a very bold choice, and I'm glad it worked out. Yeah. And it plays into what Connie was saying about show, don't tell.
That's right.
Yep, absolutely.
Exactly.
It was it's that kind of meta moment where the player and your fictional player, their avatar that you play, like you have a coinciding moment.
Yeah. Scott, there was something that you had mentioned to me earlier that I wanted to call back. When you guys were planning all of this and running down how you wanted the story to go, there was a moment when you were trying to figure out, you had this confrontation with Balthazar,
right,
and you didn't want to like step all over the final fight.
Yeah, it was a real challenge because we had set up Balthazar in the previous season of Living World, so people understood he was going to be the antagonist, and he had repowered himself, and so we have the commander, the player, taking on a god. And we knew this was going to be a tall order. You don't want to have the big final confrontation happen in the first 10 minutes.
Right.
So we hit up on a few devices. We're going to give him a herald that'll help him introduce the character and sort of set what his agenda is in the Crystal Desert. And then we thought, but we don't want to keep Balthazar off stage for the entire middle part of the story.
Yeah.
And then how do we have a confrontation with Balthazar without spoiling the ending of what the big final fight against Balthazar would be? And so we had some conversations, and we hit on the idea of, well, when you first meet him, he's much more powerful than you anticipated, and so he basically wipes the floor with you and your whole team. That was after the last confrontation. Balthazar basically levels the entire party and leaves you on the ground wondering what happened. And we were happy with that, and we had a series of meetings where we were talking about, okay, so how do we bridge that with the big final confrontation at the end? And we had some ideas, and we tossed them back and forth, and nothing seemed to be coming together. And then tip of the hat to Matthew Medina, who I believe you'll be seeing shortly. Matthew Medina, love working with Matthew. We have worked together for years and years on Heart of Thorns and Path of Fire. And Matthew has a verbal tick that you need to be aware of. Because during a meeting, Matthew will say, "Here's a crazy idea," and the next thing that comes out of his mouth is usually genius. And Matthew said, "Here's a crazy idea. What if you go up against Balthazar and he kills you?" And there was this moment where everyone in the room sort of paused, and then our eyes got really big, and there was yeah, oh yeah. And then you have to come back from the dead. You have to fight your way back and earn your way to for a rematch against the god who wiped you and your whole party out and then killed you. And so that became one of the really powerful story hooks we were able to hang the structure on. After you get killed by Balthazar, it's dismal. What are your chances? And then you have to sort of scramble and come up with a strategy and implement that strategy and outthink and outfight him. And that became the avenue we pursued, I think, to some success, because it was really, people weren't expecting to die. Once they died, they didn't know what was going to happen to them. And we had mapped all that out beforehand because Matthew said, "Here's a crazy idea."
Okay, so when Matthew says that, we need to listen.
Yep.
Is my takeaway here.
Right, definitely.
It did work out well the first time I went through that. And again, speaking as a player, I had that moment of, well, that sure did happen to me.
That didn't go as I planned.
This is not supposed to happen. What now? But yeah, the whole trek through the underworld and all of that was, first of all, it was a really fun callback, which I always love. And actually, I want to talk about that with you.
I was about to say, yeah, I was to say, like,
I did enjoy that.
Yeah, I would say Path of Fire, it presented a really exciting opportunity because we were revisiting the Crystal Desert, a place that had so much significance for Guild Wars players. And there was a lot of that, like how can we bring people up to speed, right? People who only played Guild Wars 2, right? How can we bring back to life all of these amazing stories, this world that we have already built, and retell them? I thought that particular instance was definitely one of them, right? Like being able to wander through the underworld and see all the highlights of what had happened to you as the commander. The designer that put that together, Jeff Vaughn, just really leaned into it, and that's how you know you have a good idea, when everything just like, yeah, let's keep doing it.
And I'm sorry.
Oh yeah, no, yeah.
But in terms of broad strokes, that was one of the guidelines we tried to follow when we were drafting the story and the world story of what was going to happen in the region.
Yeah.
We didn't want this to be just one long series of callbacks to Guild Wars 1. We wanted to follow up on stuff and give people updates on the things that had changed, and sort of at the same time introducing these elements to people who had never seen them before, but paying them off for people who had, while simultaneously advancing the story we are currently telling about the Elder Dragons and Balthazar. And there were lots of good examples where we succeeded really well. I think Glint's Lair, I think the Underworld, various other bits and pieces, but that was one of the guiding principles we had, and we tried to stick to it as much as we could, because otherwise we would have just gone down the rabbit hole of, look at all the cool things there are here from Guild Wars 1.
Yeah.
And not to say those things aren't cool and shouldn't deserve screen time, but we had to focus on what is the story we're telling now and move this current world forward.
That's right. You have to let the story motivate those choices that you make. We do like incorporating those kinds of callbacks for people who've been playing the game for a long time, but there has to be a reason for it.
It has
right?
to make sense. Yeah.
And I think too, excuse me. What you're probably hearing at this point is sort of a recurring theme of, we really spend a lot of time asking ourselves, what can we do that we haven't done before, that's going to challenge players' expectations, that's going to surprise them and delight them, hopefully. And I mean, that's a mindset that we really that was here when I walked in the door, and it was very gratifying to see that, because I really believe in that strongly. And we've certainly tried to keep that moving into the current season.
Yeah. Something that you had commented on, part of the callbacks, and again, the callbacks are great. I feel like you guys struck a good balance. Part of it you felt like you were opposed to at the start, and
Oh yeah, so I have to admit,
I didn't mean to call you out. It's not a bad thing.
No. I am actually happy. This might be interesting for people, but I actually, oh god, I'm going to say this on camera. I was very opposed to doing the whole Cormier scene in Chapter 7.
Really?
Yes.
Sorry.
There were some scope reasons for that, right? But in the beginning, I was really concerned. I went back. I watched the Guild Wars, Nightfall ending. I talked with some of the designers that were there at the time, and I really tried to get a sense and feel. And I was like, you know what? This is never going to be as good as people remember it, right? And we are effectively going to be rebuilding this like critical scene within the Guild Wars 2. engine, right? Like all this stuff. Like I spent hours building the composites for that scene. And it was a lot of research, asking designers that had been here at the time to send me stuff. And it was just one of those things where it's just like I didn't want to disappoint players, right? Like I didn't want this to be like, oh, hey, this is going to be a cameo. But as I started doing it, Mo really drove that. And I was like, okay, I'm willing to try. And working with the artists, working with, our incredibly talented writers, I got won over. That actually happens to me a lot in the design department. I like to be the ornery cuss. It's like, I don't know about that. But the proof is in the pudding, right? Like you build it and you go, you know what? This could be really great. Like this could be really meaningful. And as someone who actually didn't play Guild Wars 1, people later told me like, oh my, I can't believe that you rebuilt the ending of Nightfall in this entire scene. So yeah. It's definitely one of those things where it's like I was wrong. I'm not afraid to admit it.
I can see how it would be intimidating. Nostalgia glasses are super powerful.
Yes.
And that would be scary. But I think it's really, really good to have, and it says a lot for the team, that there's someone who will speak up and say, hang on, I don't know if this is the best idea, and that people can do that and work with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it does say good things, and I'm glad it worked out well.
Yeah, I would say that one of the great things about this team is we're all really strong, passionate people. We definitely butt heads every now and then, but it's always because we care. It's always because we want to tell the best story. And I think that Guild Wars 2 is a better game because the game is forged in this fire of passionate people that are trying to argue for certain things and push one thing over another. In the end, it's just it becomes it's better than anything I could have come up on my own. It's better. It is the better for the conflict. Conflict is too strong a word.
There can be conflict. It's
Sure,
okay.
no, absolutely.
Yeah.
Productive conflict. Yeah.
That's part of collaboration, I think.
Absolutely.
And something that all 6 of you have said to me is that there was so much iteration in the process of creating the story of Path of Fire, and you also had a moving target to work with, and that's something that we talked about on previous shows, is that the open world was changing.
Yeah.
And you kept having to, there was just the iteration of the story itself, and then you also kept having to adjust to accommodate the changing open world. But it sounds like you guys came through that relatively intact. You all seem as sane as you did before. I put a disclaimer.
You're gonna set the bar that
as
low?
you were before.
As you were before, yes. Right.
Some of you I've known for a while, okay?
Fun fact, that Cormier chapter, we have these sort of like moments where we evaluate if something is ready to ship. We were tweaking 7, the audio, everything, all the way until the last minute that after the game came out, one of our producers, Mark, sends me an email, says, "Congratulations, your chapter passed announce."
I did not want to know that.
This is the day after September 22nd.
That's
September
hilarious.
23rd, it was like, "Congratulations."
I think I've
Your
actually
chapter
heard this
passed.
story because
Yeah.
I remember just going,
Yeah. Yeah.
It's hilarious.
that's amazing, but congratulations. So there are a couple of other things. You were involved in a lot of the VO work down in Burbank, weren't you?
Yes, I was. And I've been fortunate enough. I have a background as an actor, a theater director, filmmaker before I got into games. And so I have a lot of experience working with actors, both live and in recording studios. It's a very specific skill set voice actors have. It's not the same as on-camera acting or
Yeah.
on-stage acting at all, although obviously there are some skills that are in common. The thing that was most, I think, interesting about some of the VO process for Path of Fire is that we had not, to be perfectly frank, done a great job previous to Path of Fire of representing as diverse voices
It's true.
ethnically in the game as I think we should have. I think we would all acknowledge that as we should have been doing. And so the fact that we were going to do an expansion pack set in this part of the world meant that that was an opportunity for us to really correct that, right? So not only were there, tons of faces of color on the screen who needed to be voiced by people of color, it wasn't just named characters who were important in the story. It was
Right.
even the generics. We didn't have. I don't know if we had any non-white generic actors who did generic parts for us
Right.
before that.
Yeah.
And so, which is dumb. I mean, it's short-sighted and it's it wasn't malicious. It was just a blind spot.
Right.
And so. What's great about the VO process for Path of Fire is we now have a much bigger stable of actors that we work with on a regular basis, which is much more diverse because of it. That was a very gratifying thing to be a part of, because I think it's a true statement in media in general, certainly in our industry, that there is not always as much diversity of representation as there ought to be, both on the screen and behind the screen. And any time we can find an opportunity to remind ourselves that that's what we should be trying to live up to, for me is a great thing. It makes you feel good. It certainly added to the quality of the thing. Now there is one exception, which is kind of a funny. It's the exception that proves the rule, if you will, which is Agent Keto. Because, and this happens, this is going to be a shocking thing I'm going to say, but sometimes we don't communicate as well with other departments as we perhaps ought to. And
Hold on, I need a moment.
I know, right? And so
It's a big building, you guys.
it is a big building. There's a lot of people here, and
There are other departments?
right. I mean, the art department is enormous, and I don't get nearly enough of an opportunity to interact with most of the art department below Horia's level, so what happened was Keto evolved out of a generic character. Generic character was given lines, cast with not an actor of color, and then evolved into a named character who became more and more important to the story, both in Pathfire and
I remember this.
in this story and in this season. And the thing is, Eve, who did the casting primarily, didn't see the model. She didn't know.
Oh,
That the
because
ki-
she wouldn't.
She had cast it originally. Again, assuming without any information to the contrary, and this is, as I said, a blind spot, that it would be probably a white character, and never knew that it needed to be otherwise until we had already recorded it. And so that's a bit of our process we're going to try to tighten up in the future.
No,
But
we did go back and re-record some voices to make sure they were actors of
that
color.
actually is true
Yeah.
with a lot of
Yeah.
people. Because when we started
Where we could.
hearing, yes, that's right.
Yeah.
I think we didn't realize at first until we started seeing it, right? How many faces of color there were on the screen, which was awesome. And yes, the voice recordings we had, the actors that we had cast, in some cases, you had clearly Caucasian voices coming out of clearly non-Caucasian mouths. And it did make sense. And Connie's right. We did go back and re-record a lot of
I would like to just further call out Eve Eschenbacher, our VO production lead. She put in a lot. Once we had that realization that this wasn't working the way we intended because of that blind spot, Eve put in some serious extra time to correct that and
Yes,
get
she
everything
did.
scheduled and organized so that we could address that situation and make it right.
Eve is a hero.
Yeah.
Eve is
Anyway.
tremendous.
Yes, she is.
She's so
awesome.
great.
Dude, shout out for your VO leads,
Yeah,
man.
totally,
They
totally.
do some hard work for us.
And also, Mo very quickly said, "Yeah, I'll greenlight the money to do that." There was no everybody was like, "Oh my gosh, yes, that's something we need to do." So
I do remember during development some of the vendors outside of Amnoon Oasis interacting with them on my character and just going, well, that sure is what you sound like. And going
Yes.
back later and catching the new voices.
Yes.
So, and that's one thing that I do love about us as a company is that we are constantly trying to get better.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
it was a blind spot, and I'm very proud that we are working to correct that.
yeah, it was a blind spot, and to be very clear, it was something that was not in line with what we know our values are.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not. We're a company that actually values that kind of diversity a lot.
Yeah.
And so we all, I think, felt a little dumb that was not that we'd missed that, and we were glad that there was time to correct it.
It's allowed.
Yeah.
So yeah, but
We'll
yeah,
miss it.
it was an interesting part of the iteration process and an interesting part of development. just catching, and that's like I said, I caught this one little bank of NPCs outside of one city in one tiny area, and I know it was more widespread than that. So it was interesting to just see that part of the process. I spent some time talking to Josh Diaz about that, and Josh, I know Josh put a lot of work and a lot of study into this region in our game.
Oh yeah, I mean
So-
it was scrupulous, right? Because it's a minefield potentially if you don't do it right, and we really wanted to make sure that our treatment of the area didn't feel like a nod to specific cultures, but rather was sort of a kind of amalgam of a general sort of Pan-African feel,
Yeah.
and that we stayed on the right side of being respectful and treating people and cultures with dignity. It's not an easy thing to do. I've seen many examples in my career of games doing it wrong, but I really feel like we have succeeded in this case in Path of Fire in the new season with that, and that's great that we can do that.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, and shout out to all our voice actors and
They're awesome.
incredibly talented people.
Absolutely. Yep.
So, speaking of voice actors, I know you guys need to get back to work. There's one more thing that I wanted to mention. You worked on the timey communication system.
Yes, yeah, those
And I wanted
checkpoints
to make sure we
where
talked
the
about
player
that.
had the option to go contact Timey remotely. Timey was being back in Radanovis. She was being pushed out of her lab by Flunt. The Sura Arcane Council had decided that they needed to take over and eminent domain her work. So Timey wasn't part of this story, but we wanted her to be part of the group. And it allowed us, storytelling-wise, it let us cover some of the events that were happening off-screen, so you could keep up with the fact that what Timey was doing in the lab, and how Aureen was doing as things went downhill, what was Kaith up to, and the fact that Aureen had left, because we didn't want Aureen to just show up literally out of a clear blue sky. We sort of gave you a heads up that she was gone.
Although
And
she's a dragon, that's
she's
kind
a
of what
dragon,
she would do.
yeah, but perception-wise.
Right.
Yes, but feel like, Timey, why didn't you tell us?
And so we had that series of updates from Timey, and then Timey joined the player during the epilogue, and after that awesome modular speech that the players are given a chance to make. And this was something I collaborated with closely Connor Fallon, the designer of that last story instance. We decided we wanted to have Timey make one last call back to the lab. And so I believe after the second to last story instance, if you try to call back lab, Flunt answers and says, "I thought we turned off all the progeny's machinery. What is this?" Timey herself, however, makes after the speech, after the party, Timey makes a crank call back to her lab, pretending to be a char. And I don't want to spoil it for you, but she kind of rakes Flunt over the coals a bit in this char persona. And I was in the recording session. I actually was able to write the lines. They were reviewed and approved. But Debbie Derryberry was behind the mic. She is the voice of Timey. She is excellent. And I said, "Okay, Debbie, what we got here is Timey's making a prank call, and she's pretending to be a char. I want to do this two ways. First, I want you to do it in your normal Timey voice that we will then add traditional char processing to make you sound more like a char. Or I also want you to do Timey doing a char impression." And between us and our audience, I had no doubt at all which one I wanted to use,
Yes.
but I felt we had to have coverage just in case. And suffice to say, Debbie ran through the straight Timey read that we were going to put processing on, no trouble at all, sounded great. But then just a thing of beauty to hear Debbie Derryberry in real time doing Timey, doing a char. It was so awesome. She knocked it out of the park. And I love, this is one of my favorite things about writing VO dialogue. As an undergrad, I wrote a lot of plays, and I was always thrilled when I write a line and I think to my head, that line's brilliant. That's a really great cap to this scene. This couldn't be better. And then I hear the actor perform it, and they add shades of meaning to it, and they improve it beyond my wildest dreams. And this was one of those cases. I thought those lines were funny. Then Debbie read them as Timey, as a char,
Yes.
and I fell out of my chair crying. It was so wonderful. It was one of the real high points was that session, and then the results. Those of you who, if you've played that instance and not heard Timey's prank call, go play it again. It's right at the end. You get the chance. It's glorious.
Debbie Derryberry is awesome. Thank you for giving her that to
Treasure.
work with.
Yeah.
So, on that note, I will let you guys get back. You guys don't go anywhere because we have 3 more devs to talk to. So, stick around, and we will be back in just a minute.
Getting
Hi, welcome back. We have 3 more of our devs from Pathfire. I'll let you guys go down the line, introduce yourselves, talk about your role here at ArenaNet and what you worked on for the Pathfire story.
Sure. I'm Bobby Stein. I'm the Associate Narrative Director at ArenaNet, and for Path of Fire, I helped with the story team for about the last year of development. I helped with script revision, rewrites, things of that nature.
And you have a very nice haircut.
Thank you. I got it specially for today.
Hi, I'm
Shout out
Connor.
to my barber.
Oh, sorry, didn't mean to cut off your.
Sorry
do you want
about
to talk
that.
about your barber some more?
Yeah, later on, I'll give referrals. I think he gives me a kickback. A nickel for every new customer.
Oh my gosh.
All right. Hi, I'm Connor. I'm was a game designer on Path of Fire. I worked on Lay of the Land, Enemy of My Enemy, and Small Victory. So basically all the Noon and Awaken content that came up in the main story. I wanted my title to be Palawa Joko Apologist, but apparently they decided to say I was a game designer, which is also true.
We checked your business cards and sorry.
Okay. All right. But yeah.
Hi, I'm Matthew Medina. Oh, wow, I can't top that. I was the story design lead
What do
for
you
Path
mean
of
you
Fire.
can't top that? You ran the entire thing.
Well, running is
All right.
that's giving me more credit.
Take it.
Yeah, no. So for my role, I not only did I do 3 of our chapters, basically the first 3. Well, no, 3 of the first 4, because you did chapter 2. So I did 3 of the first 4 chapters, implementation and story design work, and then I also was the team lead, so I oversaw Connie, Connor, and our other story designers, and liaison with pretty much everybody else, cinematics and audio and narrative team. So it was sort of my job to make sure all the pieces were coming together, and make sure that everyone was on track for what their chapters were needing. So yeah.
See, that's not taking too much credit. You did just
Nah.
fine.
Okay.
So, well, do you
And
guys...
here's a crazy idea.
Yes! What? Tell us.
Can we like sit on the floor?
The bar is
And do
really
a-
high now.
Okay.
So do you guys want to talk about some of your favorite things that you worked on for the story?
Sure. Let's see. Well, man, we rehearsed this the other day, and now
You
I'm
have
totally
no
blanking.
favorites? I'll just. I
well-
remember mine.
I
Well-
have something for you.
You do? Oh yeah, that is certainly my favorite. Okay. So, Farron
I'm
and
gonna
I go
get
way
that-
back.
oh.
That's a college photo. Spring break. Yeah, so actually that was a kind of a funny thing that, in the very beginning of Path of Fire, Farron shows up in the, first story instance in Lion's Arch. And, there's kind of a funny exchange. It's totally optional, so, I mean, a lot of players probably didn't even talk to him. They just ran out. But the player
Why
kind
would
of
you
says...
not want to talk to that?
Well, I have no idea. So if you do talk to Farron, he kind of mentions, "Hey, listen, I'm ready to come and join the fight." And the player's like, "Why don't you stay behind and guard the docks?" Kind of keeps Farron out of the picture, but he does show up at the very end in the epilogue. And I had the fun task of working with Connor on the like a lot of the optional kind of ambient stuff in the final story instance, mostly like the conversations that you can optionally have. And, we had this funny, Connor actually supplied a list of, hey, bare minimum, we should have these characters. So he separated it into 3 tiers.
We got all of them. Yeah.
Right. And I'm looking at this list and I'm like, wow, I didn't work on some of these instances. I don't know who any of these characters are. So I'm like, do I do the research or do I just tell him no dice? So at any rate, over the course of a couple of weeks, he kept bugging me. He's like, did you do the thing yet? And I'm like, oh, God. Yeah. So finally, I spent a couple of days just going through playing those other sections, getting familiar with the characters, and then writing. I think probably the bare minimum that I thought we could get away with. But the funny thing is, right at the bottom in tier 3 was Lord Farron. I'm like, if I just put this guy in like in the first pass and don't do any of the other ones, Connor's gonna be like, what the hell? So I forced myself to do those other
It was
ones.
like the dessert at the end of.
It was quite the carrot to get me incentivized. So, well, long story short, I think Connor put him in pretty front and center in the party, and we were joking. We're like, yeah, he's got to be in his Speedo, and it'll be hilarious. And there's no end to the enjoyment that I get of having Farron show up in his underwear, but not everybody thinks it's all that funny. So Mo is just like, what the hell is this? Get this out of here. So Connor, I'm like, can we just put him somewhere else so that like Mo doesn't see him? And like, because Mo's cool with basically, it's fine to have this other stuff in the game. Just make sure you're very particular about what's in the golden path, right? So
Don't sit him on the podium.
So anyway, he shuffled them around, and Connor will talk a little more about this.
Yeah, the funny thing about Farron is he's still in the middle of the party.
Yeah.
But people.
He's near the
keep
buffet
missing
table,
him.
by the way, which I
People
don't
just-
think is
yeah,
sanitary.
Yeah, people just keep running by him, and the reason is because I deliberately all the other optional characters you can talk to have little like markers above their heads. So I think players are looking for those markers for characters to talk to.
Oh, totally.
And also like he is like if you're just running forward, he's like around the corner. So like yeah, he's standing and there's a bunch of people looking at him, and he's like by the fountain, like yes, here I am. But it is amusing to me how well hidden he is. For literally standing in the middle of the party.
Sight. Yeah, totally.
Wearing nothing.
So
yeah, wearing his underwear. Yeah.
So,
that's probably. I mean, there's other things, but I think
Yeah.
that's the most fun. And then the only other thing would be getting to hang out with some of the voice actors in LA. So we've been recording audio for Guild Wars for almost 10 years now, and we've made some friendships with some of our actors. So yeah, we went out to dinner with Julie and Courtney, who were in the cast, and yeah, that's a bunch of folks who went down for the VO. So that's Courtney having an appetizer.
I feel like dinner
Of
could
Julie's hair.
have been better with the appetizers.
Yeah. So I wish I could remember. I think that place is Commonwealth. It's in Burbank. Anyway, it was a great time, and yeah, really thankful for the cast and the friendships that we've made over the years.
So, some of my favorite things I have quite a few because I had the privilege of working on content that was vastly different. So I love different things for different reasons. Mechanically, one of my favorite things I did was Chapter 10, the Mummy Command segment,
Yay!
where like you're controlling individual units to get them to do stuff. That took a lot of iteration, but people seem to have really liked it for multiple
Oh, that was
reasons.
so much fun.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. I really love
And
it.
then Tom brought this up earlier, but the speech in Chapter 13, we had to. So Chapter 13, Small Victory, the very end of the game.
The end thing.
Yes, the end thing.
You know what?
It's too late. It's
Yeah.
too late.
Statute of
Yeah.
limitations
If
on
you- if you
spoilers
watch
is
to this
so
point.
over.
So originally, didn't emphasize the consequences of killing Balthazar quite as much, and so
Okay.
in early drafts of the party, it was just straight up upbeat. Like everyone's like, "This is wonderful.
Yeah.
You're the greatest." And what happened is once we started emphasizing that, like, no, there's going to be fallout for this too. And unlike Mordremoth and unlike Zaitan, going in that there's going to be consequences. The party became kind of like we really wanted to have the sequence where like you had a chance to decompress, but it became weird because suddenly like you're like, well, now everyone's trying to throw this party, and I know everything's doomed or everything's bad, right?
How is it not already weird with Farron in his underwear?
That came later. Farron in his underwear came after we'd made it
Yes.
grimmer. We're like, now
Cherry
we
on
need Farron
top.
in his underwear to like balance it out.
Sorry, carry on.
There's a lot of. I mean, it is. I'd say it's dark comedy. A lot of it, right? Because the way the people respond to your speech, and like, my favorite one is the dude who's like, if you give a speech that's really depressing, that if you get off the stage and walk by him, he's like, well, you really sucked the fun out of this shindig. And I'm like, it's the moment you get off the stage. But the speech was introduced because there was that conflict between what the player knew and what people in the party wanted. And as Tom was saying, like different people there was disagreement about how much the commander should be a downer and like ruin the party.
So we give you that choice.
And yeah, we rewrote the script multiple times, and finally I was just like, well, I mean, you know what? It's like last minute, but I think we can turn this into gameplay. And we literally implemented the speech like in the last stretch.
Seriously?
Yeah, in
Right at
the
the
last
very end,
stretch.
yeah.
Oh my gosh, that sounds so stressful.
And
It was.
but it
Very-
was a really good closer. So I'm very proud of that.
you should
and-
be.
Yeah. And you know, it was a lot of very close work with narrative to make it happen.
But what about the DLC that you put in for that?
Oh yeah, you mean the
Oh,
box?
This was the
I
best part.
honestly feel a little bit bad about how that high. So originally there's this podium for the speech. And there was I remember like a couple weeks in, there was a Reddit thread that was like, this podium is an insult to Asura commanders everywhere and should be executed. And I'm like, oh.
Goodness.
And there's a screenshot of the podium, and like the little Asura ears are like just barely sticking
Oh.
up behind the podium. I'm like, right, that's a thing. And so I, reached out, and I'm like, I figured out like how to place a box that only showed up if you're an Asura, and then the art went all out and gave me like a custom box that's like an upside down apple cart, and there was a patch note that was just like, added a box for Asuran commanders to stand on during a key story step. And everyone immediately knew what it was about, and there were all these other important things in the patch notes, but the thread was just like, oh my god, there's a box now. Like, I don't know. People really liked that box.
I'm just picturing you at your desk going, I worked so hard on so many other things. It's a good thing to be proud
But,
of.
I mean, yeah, there were all the other stuff had had its time in the limelight, but the box became like it was the highlight of that big long patch update
Yeah.
for a lot of people. Was fascinating.
The apple box's time is now.
Yeah.
How about you, Matthew?
In rehearsal, I gave a really pat, sort of bland answer. So I'm going to change it and throw
I
you a
didn't
curveball.
feel like it was bad, but go ahead.
Okay.
Is this the crazy idea?
No, that was cool. So I won't repeat what Scott said, because that was one of the funnest meetings I think that we've ever had here at ArenaNet for Guild Wars 2 story. Because sometimes I do have these ridiculous notions in my head that I think there's no way anyone's going to agree to this, right? Like, but I'm like, wow, what the hell? We're all good buddies, and
Let's find out.
we just hang out and have fun in these meetings a lot of the time. I mean, our story breaking meetings are some of the funnest things. I mean, believe me.
I've seen the whiteboards.
Oh gosh. Yeah, I wish we could share some of them, but they're often inappropriate.
I've seen those too.
Yeah. So
Anyway.
for me, I think the one that now sticks out for me is at the end of your first encounter with Balthazar, when you climb up on the plateau and you see him there for the first time, and the last time you'd seen him, he was just sort of like, wrecking everything, and then he peace out, and you're like, okay, clearly there's something, this is going to be a massive confrontation. So you're preparing for it, and the Herald gets in your way, and you kind of have a nice boss fight with her, and you get past it. But when you first see this all taking place, we had talked with our cinematics team about, now we're going to have this awesome cinematic here because we want to deliver this awesome moment. And we knew it wasn't going to be a fight with Balthazar, so we didn't want to let players in on too much.
Yeah.
So we thought a cinematic would make good sense here. And then Mo comes to the project and he says, we have too many cinematics. We need to do all this stuff in game.
All right.
And we were like, okay. Sure. Let me just go talk to a half dozen people. But I mean, it was an awesome experience of how do you do something that we had spent a fair amount of time on this cinematic already, and I actually think somebody digged it out of our DAT file. So you unofficially can go check
Have
it
to
out
go
if you
look
want.
for it.
I will
Don't
not.
encourage that.
Yeah, I will not encourage this, but it was a fully produced cinematic. It was getting close to finished, and so there was a lot of work done on it. So like, how do we replicate that in game?
Yeah.
Thankfully, we have a team of awesome wizards here on the art team They worked together, prop artists, map artists, and the cinematics team and the animators, and they all basically said, all right, let's extract this, let's import this, bring this together, put this in, we make a gadget out of it, you can spawn the gadget in the world, click play, and all of a sudden we've got a cinematic running in real time in the game. It created a little bit of a shenanigans for me in terms of now we have 2 Balthazars in the world, because we had the one that I had spawned for the encounter, and now we have the cinematic version of him, and they're sitting side by side. And so I was like, oh, that's interesting. So I had to maneuver a lot of things around to make that happen. But it's one of those things of like, yeah, I love that we're a company that constantly challenges ourselves to say, hey, yeah, that's cool. Because, I mean, the cinematic is awesome. It's beautiful. But to be able to say, yeah, that's awesome and beautiful, not going to ship it. Do it again.
Let's make it gameplay.
Do it a different way.
Yeah.
Because, and ultimately, in the end, that was absolutely the right call, because you being able to come up on that scene and run into it and experience that, you
Felt
know,
awesome.
yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you lost a little bit of like, obviously you don't lose player camera, or so you have to turn your head to look at it, but that's where we had map art make sure that you were looking right at it and making sure that all the sight lines were guiding you towards this moment. Yeah, it's one of those things that really worked out really well. So
Yeah, it did. And that goes back to what we were talking about in the last segment with there were a lot of changes and there was so much iteration,
Yeah.
and everybody came together to make it work.
yeah.
You guys should be super, super proud of that.
I realized I should have brought this up when talking about the speech, because I failed to do it during the rehearsal. But do we have the image of the percentages of what people did for the
We
speech?
do, actually. Of course, now I can't find it. But yeah, there were so many choices.
Yeah, so the way the speech was actually calculated was, again, there were different values. Most people gave upbeat speech, which of course worked out great for them when the storm showed up like 2 seconds later. I'm sure they felt great about their choices. A couple people gave super downbeat speeches. The way it worked is there was a point value assigned to each thing. And if you had a majority upbeat, I think the last one was worth 2 and all the other ones were worth 1.
Okay.
If you had majority upbeat, you got an upbeat speech. If you had majority downbeat, you got a downbeat speech. If you had, it had to be like vague had to be like, it had to be the most overall, right? In order to be vague. And then confusing was if upbeat and downbeat were tied. Everyone was just like, that. I don't know what you're hoping.
I was the 10%.
Yeah,
That was
yeah.
me.
But that's the one where people are like, if you run around out in the party after the speech, people are like, I don't know what you were trying to say, but
What
it's
is wrong with
a
you?
bunch of muggity muck. And the M Noon choice as well, we tracked. But who picked different things? Only 18% of people picked Joko for some reason,
That is a
despite his
fatal flaw.
yeah, despite his
Weird.
glorious leadership.
Yeah.
But the thing that's cool is since we had these all tracked, we were able to call back to them in Living World in episode 1, and I actually helped out with a little bit of that. And like, it very rarely post core game have we had things that we were able to track and loop into future content. So it was nice to be able to do that again.
Yeah, having some of the Living World, or having some of the core story things
Yes.
bleed out into the open world is an
Yes.
element that we've added that I've really enjoyed.
Yes. So yeah, that was my big thing with the chapter 2 choice. Some people, it was really a choice for M Noon rather than a choice for yourself. So like some people were like, why didn't it cause my commander to do radically different things? But it did change the tone of the city forever.
Yeah.
And I really enjoyed the fact that like even now whenever I watch a stream, like when someone runs through Amnoon, I'm like, I know what you did. I know what you did. You sold the city out to Joko, or you like you went with the Sun Spears, even though there's only like 3 of them.
You're a terrible person.
Yeah. But the and then timing contact points, which I also worked on, were another instance, right? It's like there are these things in the open world that advance as you progress with the story, and the idea of just like blurring those lines a little bit, right, between like what is happening in the instances and what is happening outside of them. So yeah, luring Arcana Biru out was another one, changing all the flags and doing things like that. And I think it's pretty cool to have the city feel different based on what you chose, and to have ambient conversations and all these other things that respond to what you do. We actually changed it post-launch because we didn't have the ability to use actual characters. They were gadgets pretending to be characters originally. And then we got that tech.
liars.
And I went back. I know.
Imposters.
I went back and changed them all. And now, actually, if you look outside Amnoon, occasionally you'll see whatever faction you chose fight off Forged,
Oh, yeah,
approaching
yeah.
the city. So you feel like they're actively contributing to the city not being overrun like everywhere else in Path of Fire is. Yeah.
That's awesome. Matthew, something we had talked about callbacks in the previous segment
Yeah.
also, and I wanted to talk about the Herald of Balthazar.
Yes. So when we, as Scott had talked about earlier, when we decided that, we didn't want to have the first confrontation with Balthazar in the first 10 minutes of this expansion, but we knew we were building to that. We wanted to have this character, the Herald of Balthazar, and initially that was just who, we were planning to have her be. Just
Random Herald number 14.
Yeah, just a forged who happened to have risen to the rank of Herald. And as we started to get deeper into the story, I kind of felt that it would be better for us if we hid the identity of this character as an actual character from Guild Wars 1. And so we talked about who that could be, and I had pitched this idea that it would be Devona. Devona, if you don't know, if you've not followed Guild Wars 1, she was one of the henchmen in the early game. She would come with you on your adventures. She was a great hero, wielded a hammer. Sometimes she had a sword and shield, but she was a warrior. And so she was one of the people who would come out with you in the instance maps of the original game. And so in thinking about it, I was sort of struck by the fact that as a warrior, she would absolutely have been a follower of Balthazar. Clearly, it's been 250 years, so she had long passed away, and presumably had gone into the mists to fight in the Eternal War alongside Balthazar. So when Balthazar returns and begins and goes to make his forged army, it would make sense for him that he would draw from that ghostly army to take those spirits and put them into forged bodies. And so, and it was also the case that we didn't really have any other examples of forged who we could identify with. So we kind of wanted to have her be somewhat of an important character, but not be upfront and in your face with it. So we constructed this, sort of secret identity, if you will, and I was able to lay in some little Easter eggs that ended up being an achievement in one of the story instances that sort of confirms her identity, and we didn't say anything more about it. And we tried to keep it a secret and let the fans and the players who dig deeper and kind of put all the pieces together. And it was only a couple months, I think, before the first person threw Devona's name out, and I was like, ooh, they're onto it.
It's funny. I don't know when we officially confirmed it, but like the wiki page is written it's like here's Devona's story, and at the bottom it's like Devona is based on speculation. This being so now it's we can say it actually is Devona.
Yeah,
Yes.
confirmed.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember we had talked about how you didn't want to be super, super overt about it.
Right.
And I remember I was running through it with a couple different guildmates a couple different times, and I was trying so hard to lead them without telling them. I was like, "What is she wielding? Listen to what she's saying. Oh God, you guys, come on!"
Yeah, that was one of the ones that we one of the specific clues was we took lines that she had specifically said in Guild Wars 1 because they had battle chatter back then, and so we threw that in as a specific line that she says again in this. Just as another, sort of overt callback without it being too overt. Like you had to get really deep in the lore and understand the character and have spent a lot of time with that character to probably have keyed in on it. But we wanted to have that connective tissue.
Yeah, and you pulled back a little bit on that, like with her hammer, had her.
Yes, in the original version of the final fight with her on the top of the plateau, she would sometimes drop the hammer. And you could run over and pick it up and smash her with it. And we like that from a mechanical standpoint, at least on paper, because we wanted, she had spent 2 instances smashing you over the head with it, and we were like, we definitely want you to have that moment of like, no, you get a taste of your own medicine.
Seriously.
And
It's very Witcher.
yeah, and all of our weapons, at least on the back end for us, we have a name field where we can fill it in. So I made the hammer named Mordecai after her father, because I thought that's exactly what she would name her hammer. She had a good relationship with her father. It was they had a nice repartee in the back. She was always sort of devoted to her father, so I thought it'd be fitting. And so while we had that in the game, it's not something we ended up shipping because there was a lot of other problems with the hammer, specifically players carrying it outside the instance.
Nice.
Against our wishes. So we couldn't protect against that in every case. So we
Taking this
ended
home.
up yanking it out. But
Cool
while
hammer.
you were wielding it, if you looked in the combat log, which a lot of people don't necessarily look at the combat log while they're fighting, especially for PvE, but you would have seen, you were doing damage with Mordecai
Aw.
for certain skills. So, yeah.
All right. Well, it's good to know that it could have been.
It could have been.
So, this might be more for you, but again, calling back to the iteration and working through bumps in the road during development, her voice acting was a little bit off, and we had to work
Oh.
with that.
Wow. Yeah, her.
Maybe more than a little bit.
Well, yeah, her. Wow, that character was really hard to get right, or as close to right as we needed. Her dialogue went through I don't know how many rewrites, and because she was a really important character in the first and the fourth story chapter.
Yeah.
First, third, and fourth. Yeah.
Yeah, so she's around enough that we really need to make sure that whenever she has to chime in, not only is she saying the kind of things that we need her to progress the story, and but also just sound good to the ear. Let's
Yes.
just say, and
Sound right.
Well, I think first we had a different. I don't remember if we had a different actor in the recast.
We recast her.
We recast her, and then this is an actor who we had used a long time ago, and I don't think we had back, but we figured that she had played a Norn, I think, previously.
Uh-huh.
So we brought her back to do a human voice, and yeah, there was a lot of rewrites, and yeah, I gotta say that I'm glad that we spent a lot of time trying to get it right, because I think if we hadn't done that amount of extensive revision, it would have been not good.
I think that definitely calls back to what Tom was talking about earlier in regards to, I think that's another case where I think our communication probably was not ideal in that
Really?
we probably didn't properly sort of convey who the Herald was as a character
Yeah.
enough for them to cast her properly.
Right.
Because
Really?
what we got back was very different from what I think any of us had envisioned, and I
Yep.
think it's just
We
we
didn't
had never
communicate it well
conveyed
to
that
Eve.
well.
To be fair, I think her character evolved a lot in the
It
time
did.
that we were working on her
it
as
did.
well. So like her actual personality and how devoted she was and how happy she
That's
was
true.
to be murdering all these people.
She's very bloodthirsty
Yeah,
at
there's
first.
a point where she's like, yeah, murdering people's great, and now she's more like, this is my duty, right?
Right,
yeah.
Like this is a matter of honor.
And I think that was also part of the Devona change, because
Yeah.
when we decided, hey, this is going to actually be Devona, because I had floated that, and it was sort of on the fence for a long time about whether we would actually pull the trigger on that. And when we decided, we're okay with this, that was definitely when we were like, okay, we can't have her be bloodthirsty in the
Yeah.
same way. Like, she is still, a forged, and so she has to have a certain lethalness to her. But this is somebody who has been corrupted and perverted from what her heroic status was. So we kind of had to find that nice balance. I think we struck it.
Yeah, I think we needed to get at the fact that deep
Yeah.
down inside this shell of armor, it was somebody kind of struggling to get out and
Yeah.
didn't really want to be doing the things that she was doing.
Jeez.
Downer.
Yeah, I love the moment where at the end she's like, she finally breaks down and is like, show that you're better. Kill my god, right? Like
Welp.
that moment would not have worked if not
Yeah.
for all those iterations.
However, if we do have a Devona line about, killing people's great, I would love to have that.
Well, I'm sure we got it somewhere.
If we've got that actual line somewhere in VO, if you could give that to me later, I would love that.
Okay.
So,
I think we've kept all those.
I'm sure we have them
Probably,
in the depot somewhere.
Yeah.
oh, please. Continuing on the theme of iteration, Mummy Command
Right.
changed a whole bunch.
Yes. So, Mummy Command has quite a lineage, and I need to credit everyone involved. So it started out as the original mechanics were like you create AoEs and the mummies will attack anything in the AoEs. That was made by Lisa Davis, who was a very talented designer who worked on the open world. Lena, who was here and as a designer, I basically ended up taking over a lot of her content.
Yeah, actually you did. Yeah.
She then was like, "This is great," and we've got this chapter that is about taking control of the Awakened. I am going to lift these mechanics and modify them and put them in. And then I came on and I'm like, I'm going to blow it up and do it differently. Same idea. And originally it was when I inherited it, it was more tower defensey. Like the forged were coming towards you, and then you just were trying to keep them from going into Ogin's camp.
Okay.
But we reversed it so that you're leading them to do a raid on the forge because that felt more active. And then we modified the mechanics so you had more fine-grained control because we really wanted you to feel like, yeah, I'm giving orders to these individual Awakened. And so the metaphor I picked was Pikmin. Sort of like you find mummies around and you collect them, and then the more mummies you have, the stronger you are. And then mechanics continue to evolve from there. Mo was big on the idea that like, hey, like, yes, this is like one instance, but like if you've got all these different things I can do, I should need to use all of them.
Yes.
And so the fact that we introduced like forge that had like magnetic forge that repel like ranged attacks, right? And added a bunch of things to really like force you to engage with the mechanics as deeply as you'd want. And then the big one was there was a big debate about whether or not we should have a heal skill because eventually we removed it. But like it felt bad to have your mummies die for a long time, and so but having a heal skill resulted in you standing around and like healing all your mummies after every small encounter, and that didn't feel very good. So we wound up really leaning into the mummies are disposable, right? Like they're weak, they die easily, but you can get more if you like backtrack or press ahead, and that wound up being the right balance. So yeah. And dancing. Dancing was a key feature that was added. Shortly after Path of Fire came out, someone uploaded a music video of I don't know the actual name of the song, but it's something about like it talks about being like an LA devotee or something like that. That might actually be the name of the song.
Amazing.
But it's just the great thing about it is other players also get turned into mummies. So they had the other players doing dance moves that the mummies don't do normally, like off in specific positions, like in the background. It was great.
Yeah. The moment when I figured that out was so much fun playing because I'm thinking, okay, they're falling into position. I mean, there's a very specific lineup.
Yeah.
And they're doing
The formations are very
Yeah.
nice.
I wonder. And I had that moment of, we did it. We actually did it. So thank you.
There's a dance Easter egg in Chapter 13, too.
Yeah.
There's a specific place where if you,
achievement for it,
sorry,
isn't
there's a specific place where if you dance in the party, everybody else at the party starts, even like the Awakened, if you pick the Joko faction, turn towards you. They watch you for a little bit, and then spreading outwards from you, they all start dancing.
Where is this place?
It's in front of the stage where the
Very
band
last
plays.
chapter.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. I haven't tried that, but I will.
But yeah, figuring out what to do with other players, non-instance owners, was a whole thing. Because we like again, like when you die, when one of our chapters is literally the main character dies, what do you do with everybody else?
Yeah.
I struggled with it. The one I had the most trouble with, and I think what we did was okay. Was in another part of chapter 10, the beast catch, where where am I jumping ahead?
No, you're fine.
Okay.
I was actually
You're very
looking for that
efficient.
video.
Yeah.
You go in whatever order you want.
Yes. The beast catch. Basically, there's this thing where like the main character needs to. It was designed so they have to drain enemies in the environment in order to catch up to this creature that's ridiculously fast. I actually had the max speed for No, not yet.
No.
Spoilers. Oh no! I'm not telling my story anymore. It's ruined.
No, now you have to tell it. You're committed. You're committed now. I'm sorry, you're stuck.
I actually had the max potential speed for creatures raised because I had to get a creature that was faster than the mounts in order to make you have to speed up to catch up to it. Yeah, there was
I know
this
a
whole
creature
like
that is.
there's this whole like there's this whole like look into the code and see if the game would explode if we raised max creature speed, and it
Oh,
didn't.
jeez, right?
But like it was a whole ordeal to make the
ticking
branded
time bomb.
devourer run ahead. Yeah, it might still explode. Yeah, maybe in a couple weeks someone will pull me into an office and be like, "You destroyed Guild Wars," and I'll be like,
Listen, I'm going to give you my on-call schedule. Just so
but one of the things we had to do was other players couldn't just mount up because they just wouldn't be fast enough. If I
Right.
gave them the same drain ability, then they would could potentially kill the things that the main character had to drain before they got
Okay.
to them, and also just clog the screen and make it harder to see the thing that they actually need to
which
catch.
is the worst.
Yes. So I decided to transform them, and I tried into like basically ghosts that could run really fast, or creatures that can run really fast. And originally they
yeah.
were the same sort of wisps as in Chapter 9. Sorry, when you die.
Yeah.
But the problem with that was when you're going that fast, if you have no indication of what direction you're facing, you end up veering off course and running into walls a lot, and people generally had a miserable time. Then I tried human ghosts, which is actually what we wound up going back to and shipping. Human ghosts that I call crackdown ghosts because they can if anyone's played Crackdown, then one of the defining things is you can jump insanely high and like land, and you feel super powerful about that. So it's basically ghosts that could run insanely fast and jump insanely high. But there was Art had the comment, which is fair, that like these characters have legs, and their legs were not designed to go that quickly. The animations are like
It looks
right, yeah.
ridiculous.
So I tried some other creatures, turning you into some other creatures, and as the video spoiled, one of the attempts
Mark.
was
That was actually me.
Oh,
So
you did it.
I did it.
yeah.
Yeah.
At least
Ruby.
yell at the right person.
We tried Ghost Choya because Choya start rolling.
Now I can't find it.
When they move quickly. You can't. Now you can't. Okay. Yeah. The issue with it is like they didn't really roll all the time. Sometimes they just wobble around. Yeah, you can see that. And then when they rolled, it looked great.
It's so random.
And when you use the skill, which you can't see here, but it was originally called the Chorus of Ghost Choya, or like or Encouragement of the Ghost Choya. Then it gave the speed boost, and your Choya would like bang on their chest.
Oh my gosh.
Narrative didn't like it for some reason.
Oh man, well, remember you tried to stealth this one in. Turn around, you're like, how do you feel about I don't even remember how you phrase it. But
Ghost
it was
Choya.
like, Ghost Choya. And
I
was like,
didn't beat about the bush. I was just like, how do you feel about Ghost Choya?
I'm like, how do I feel about them being used? How? And then it was this whole thing. I'm like, do we really need? I'm like, I know when you kill them, they explode into like fruit slices.
What's
not
the
really
narrative
sure
justification for them being here?
What's their afterlife about?
Yeah.
I'm like, do we really need to be answering this question? And then, I want to have. I'm like, yeah, but there's. As fun as that would be, I just
No.
really don't think it makes a lot of sense.
And Ghost Humans worked fine. Ghost Choya would have been too goofy, but I'm glad we tried it because it was hilarious.
Well, you tried Jin too, right?
Yes, I tried Jin, and Jin can't jump. Probably because they don't have legs.
True.
But if I transform you into a Jin, my solution was, my first thought was like, well, if the legs look goofy when you're moving too fast, I'll just turn you into something that doesn't have legs.
No legs.
But then you were just stuck on the ground, and it felt really bad. And also the Jin, when they attacked, they did this. Like, I don't know,
Are you
they were
serious?
about to do a dance, and their arms stayed up for way too long, and I was just like, okay, so Ghost didn't do anything weird like that. So
I feel like you overcame so many obstacles to make this happen.
Oh,
this was over the course of like 2 weeks.
Yeah,
so-
there was this thing of when we do design story content for single player first, because most people play it one person, right?
Okay.
But then we really want to still make it an enjoyable experience when other people are coming in, and it just so happened that chapter was one of the harder ones to figure out
Yeah.
for how to hit both of those things.
Yeah, you could just spawn more like creatures to drain. Use event scaling or something like that.
Okay, I maybe, but then it's like There's still the problem of them clogging up the screen.
Well, that was the thing. Yeah,
that was the
way
big
too many
thing
of
I
them
wanted to
in there.
avoid. Yeah, I didn't want to
400
have.
eels.
Yeah, we do have performance. That we have to worry
perf.
about. Yeah.
Oh,
Um,
gosh.
I remember those
Oh,
discussions.
no.
Oh, that's right. Perf was the thing.
Yeah.
I remember those tests. Those were super fun.
Oh
Yes.
God.
They were not.
Just in case your sarcasm was not clear.
Yes.
Just make sure
It
you
was not fun.
clarify. Notes. Perf was super fun. Got it.
Well, is there anything else that you guys want to cover? Because I know you also need to get back to work, and I've made you wait even longer.
Did we? I can't. We didn't talk about this in rehearsal. Did we get the?
It's been so long.
The. I mean, I can talk about it, but I don't know if we have the video for the Balthazar one-on-one.
We don't have the video. Oh,
Oh.
but talk about it anyway
Okay.
because it's funny.
Speaking
So.
of- yeah.
Yeah, as we alluded to earlier, when we first come upon Balthazar, we obviously didn't want to have the player have any sort of really meaningful, like, we didn't want that to be the boss fight, because like you don't want to have the boss fight with the main bad guy of your game, before even getting to the first third.
Yeah.
So we came up with a lot of different ideas, and it was frustrating. It was a lot of back and forth,
Yeah.
a lot of design work and narrative and Mo, and there was just a lot of competing sort of thoughts going on, and I was kind of frustrated. And it was late one day, and I was like, you know what, I like fun, goofy stuff too. So I just in my test map whipped up a very quick example of Balthazar and a dance off. And so in my test map, you can do slash dance, and you point at Balthazar, and then you call him out, and then he points back at you, and then the music drops, and then the two of you basically just do a dance.
That's right, because at that point he was on the human rig, so
Yes.
he had all the human.
He
dance
has all
moves.
the human dance moves.
Yeah,
So,
all the awakened.
and it's all synced up and everything.
All the awakened are on the Norn rig, which made
Oh, really?
that's why they're
Oh,
able when you're
okay.
turned into awakened, you can do all the emotes,
Yeah.
which is a lot of fun. Yeah.
Oh, I did have something I wanted to mention.
Please do.
So, the stuff on the cutting room floor, in terms of the story structure, we went back and forth, I don't know how many times, about where to do certain reveals in the story. Like, Chapter 7, when you go and meet Cormier originally was, I think, a cinematic, and that got cut, and we had to knock our heads together with Connie. I'd be like, well, how do we take this gigantic moment and, pace it out and all that? So, but I think the one thing that really sticks out is Ritlock. Man, we had to fight to figure out how best to get him to come clean with the player. And I
Oh,
think
yeah.
originally it was in something like either in Chapter 6 or Chapter 7 as you're going through in the tomb. He's like, by the way, I'm going to tell you about something that's completely unrelated to what we're doing now. And because it was we kept struggling to find a good moment, and I think we decided to just spread it out between a couple of different chapters to where now I think the moment comes across a lot better where you're in this showdown with Balthazar and players basically getting up in his face, and Balthazar is like, all right, I'm going to kick your ass. And, oh, by the way, Char, you all spare, buddy.
Because,
And the player's like,
we're cool now.
What's he talking about? Like, and then lights everybody up. And I think the way that kind of came, it felt like it didn't actually come out of nowhere. We did a couple of things to lead up to that moment, but I think it was a lot more powerful that we put it there and got it done and out of the way
Yeah, totally.
rather
There-
than stringing it along.
Really, it was a big struggle to figure out what that went. Like there was talk of cutting that cinematic, and we were like, that's our reveal of like
Yeah,
what
we had
Ritlock
to
had
fight
been doing
for
yeah.
that one.
Yeah,
Well, you can see how Ritlock would feel awkward about saying this.
yeah. Hey,
Yeah.
I let the bad guy out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
By the way, so I did a
Good job,
thing,
me. Yeah.
and just hear me out. So to be clear, I'm not throwing you out. As long as you want to tell secrets, I'll listen.
Yeah.
But if you guys have covered everything, I'm also good.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'll just chime in on that one in terms of like, yeah, that one moved several times. Like it started, I believe, in 7. We pushed it back to 6. No, we pushed it back to 5, where he's going to confess after you defeat in Glint's lair. Like,
Yep.
And then that didn't feel right because it was like, well, what does that have to do with Glint and all this stuff? Like, there was just so many things. So we're like, all right, well then let's just get it out of the way. Let's put it in 1. And we're like, no, that makes no sense
too
at all.
early.
Like, what? He's just gonna confess spontaneously.
We tried putting it in 6 as well, where he's
yeah.
like right before we go into the mists, he's like, wait,
Yeah, I
I
have
got a
something
thing
I
to
have
tell
to
you before we go meet.
Exactly. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Yeah.
We might run into some friends.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I mean, we had rationalizations for all these steps, but nowhere like we never really ever moved to the point where Balthazar says, "I'm going to spare you," and so it's like, okay, that's the point at which I think we absolutely just
Everything kind of
that's,
comes
that's
together.
the
and-
confluence
yeah.
point of all this.
Yeah.
Of like, and Ridlock's not the kind of guy who would belabor a point, right? Like he's very upfront, straightforward. So like the minute you confront him on that, I think he's just the type of guy to be like, all right.
I was
fine."
going to say it if you didn't.
Yeah, but I said later, Cub.
Oh well. Yeah. Thank you for calling me a liar.
No.
I'm sorry. go
Again, you can see how he'd feel awkward about saying it.
Yeah,
One
no.
Yes. No.
Not belaboring the point.
on. It wasn't important until that moment.
True.
Yes.
I think he had run out of room to hide.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
he kept ghosting players on that whole thing for like
Well, and actually,
2 years.
that was even at the start of chapter or at the end of chapter 1.
Happened in chapter 1, yeah.
When you first meet Ritlock and you see him for the first time and back in the desert, you're like, oh, what are you doing here, right? Like, interesting. Like, we didn't have, and I kept pushing to put this in that moment of the player. I always want our commander to kind of speak on behalf of the player who's behind
Yeah.
the keyboard as
Yeah.
well, because like I think a lot of our players, I don't ever want to feel like I'm insulting their intelligence. They're going to want to have certain things. So like, as a player, I'm like, there is no way I'm not going to call him out.
Yeah.
Like the first time I see him after, him being dragged away, I'm like, you need to come straight with me. So, but we obviously didn't want to have that moment there. So when you do that, he's like, look, I get it. You're going to know, right? Like, because I wanted to make sure that players knew at the end of chapter 1 that they would be getting the answer in this expansion.
Yeah.
And they wouldn't have to sit too long for it. Because
Yeah.
they'd already waited long enough, I think.
Well, it's funny too because they played the demo, and
Yeah.
they were like, "Way to slap us in the face, ain't it? Tease us again."
Yeah.
And we were kind of sitting here like, "No, it's coming, it's coming."
Hang on, I promise. But yeah, I appreciate the player character in that case speaking on behalf of the player behind the keyboard, saying, you've been saying later, Cub, for a very long time, and it's time. You need to stop putting us off.
Yeah.
So yeah, do you feel happy with the way that concluded?
I do. I think it was as well as we could execute on that moment.
I mean, I've seen multiple streams where like people are playing the game and they're enjoying it, and then during the scene with Ritlock, they're like, "Oh, there's
Oh.
like it's a beat of them being like, there's some the characters are seriously tied to this story
Yeah.
or something.
Yeah.
Like it's more woven,
Yeah.
as opposed to just a series of events.
Yeah.
There was talk of us
trying.
doing it as a playable experience. But that ran into so many crazy ideas.
Like play as Ritlock.
Yeah,
and,
and because
I did not know
it was
that.
sort of like,
That's
okay,
fascinating.
we've done that before where
pitched a lot of
where we
different ideas.
portrayed
Yeah.
Kaith, but like we had a mechanic why that was the case, that you were planting these memory seeds, and like that doesn't work for Char. Like, so
No.
what is that? Is it? We didn't want to just do a
Yeah,
flashback
flashback.
type of thing.
So when do we play as Farron?
Oh God,
Yeah.
not soon enough.
Well, if it's a crazy idea, I know a guy.
Yeah. So here's a crazy idea. Let's do it as a fractal. Oh, did I just commit?
there's speaking
Like
of
I know
there's
like
not-
3 dudes who are gonna kick the door and drag you out of here right
We're
now.
this interview is over.
Okay. Oh man,
On that note.
I'm unhappy because I really like that idea.
Well,
Okay.
we can always go talk to that team after this.
You do
We
that.
just-
I will be in the
threw him on
opposite
this.
direction.
I was just about to say,
Sorry,
you mentioned
guys.
that. Like, why isn't there enough Lord Farron cosplay? I'm just wondering. Putting that out to the community to.
Don't look at
What
me.
is Lord Farron cosplay? Just like
He just
walking
wants-
around in your
Oh, no,
underwear?
I'm
It's
not gonna
probably
say- I'm
the
not gonna
cheap-
go there.
it's
Here's
the
thing.
cheapest
It
costume that
requires
anybody
a
can put
lot
together.
of work and a lot of tanning oil.
That
to
is correct.
Cosplay Lord Farron.
I could come as that for
I might
next
have the
year's
hair.
Halloween,
Nah,
but
I don't.
yeah, I don't know. That probably makes.
I
a
mean,
few
we've
people
got the
uncomfortable.
costume contest, so
Yeah.
A lot of core muscle work, I think.
Yeah.
No,
You
I'd
have
be, I'd
till
be, I'd be
Halloween.
middle-aged Farron.
Yeah.
I
Farron.
think I could work. I can pull that off. Yeah, look. I just have to put my hair.
There you go.
I don't have the hair though.
on that
I'll have
note,
to glue. I'll have to get some to glue on.
thank you guys very, very much. I
Thank you.
appreciate your time. Thank you all for spending some time with us,
Thank you.
and we will see you on the next Guild
All right.
Chat.